Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Business Without Burnout podcast. Today, I have a very special guest. Many of you all know, if you are an avid listener of the podcast, that Dielle Charon is one of my closest friends. She's also one of my incredible mentors. But what so many people don't know is that she is also a social worker. And I'm going to attempt to read your credentials. She got her master's in social work degree from UNC Chapel Hill. She did undergraduate at the Loudoun Meredith College. She has worked in prisons. She has worked in eating disorder clinics. She has studied group. You are a qual scholar?
You're insane.
She has studied, basically anytime I say anything, she said she has studied that extensively. She said that she had extensive advanced curriculum on it. So there's nothing that you can say that she won't say that she studied thoroughly. And so that is Dielle Charon. So I am very excited to have her on as a subject matter expert today on our mental health episode.
I'm super excited.
Please correct me and anything that I messed up.
No, so I just wanted to share, and this is, I love talking about social work. Back when in undergrad, social work, there was a few of us, but there was a lot more biology majors or whatever. And so whenever I told someone that I was studying social work, they would always make a face. And the number one thing is people would say, oh, you're just trying to take like people's kids away. I'm like, no, social work. I always say where there's people, there's a social worker. At a hospital, at a school, at a community clinic, there's social workers. Everyone famously knows my story where I worked at Duke University, and my job at Duke was taking care of students who were on scholarship from sub-Saharan Africa. So if there was a breakup, if there was a health issue, I'll have to go to the hospital. If there was something going on with their grades, anything dealing with people, that's what we studied. And so I love being a social worker. It's funny, on TikTok, I always introduce myself as a social worker. And so a lot of I have a little social work community on TikTok. It's so fun. Yes.
And that was really the joke, if you all didn't catch, is that she's very passionate about social work. Very, very passionate. And honestly, one of the big things that I've learned from you is just how much social work really addresses the whole person, as opposed to many modalities, which doesn't address the whole person. And yes, when I say the whole person, I'm talking literally literally everything that impacts them.
I think my husband is a psychologist. That's his background. But with social work, so he studied cognitive behavioral therapy, and we did too. But the difference between social work was our classes were literally birth through adolescence through death, and the lifespan of all the different things that could happen to a human in the Western world and how that impacts them. That's what I studied. And I also think that's why I'm so good at sales, because I was able to think about all the different ways society impacts people. What happens when you go through a breakup? What happens if you're housing insecure? What happens if you're addicted to a substance? What happens if you don't have a safe home to go to? All the different things we studied. And so I think that really informs how I coach, how I teach, how I see the world.
Yeah. Before we dive in, I know we were joking before, but I do want you to run through your credentials. I want you to tell the people.
I kind of already did. I got okay.
No, she didn't.
Okay, so a few things. So I got my bachelor's in social work and my master's in social work. And that's a high distinction within itself, because I was just telling Gina this. Social work is one of the most standardized degrees you can get. Someone in Oklahoma and someone in North Carolina can have the same degree. You can't get that nearly nowhere else. So our education is very standardized. I did a nonprofit internship at NAMI, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness of the state of North Carolina, one of the biggest coalitions for mental illness. I studied there. I studied at a prison. I've studied in schools. I did some work with eating disorders. I've done some work with substance abuse. Oh my gosh, I've done work with kids. I was about to go into geriatrics, but then I was like, let me pivot to higher education. I've done it all. I've worked with international students. I work with students at risk.
You've studied community management.
I've done community management. I did lobbying for the state of North Carolina. I was in policy work. I've kind of done it all.
And you were on the PhD track, if I'm correct.
I forgot all about
Yeah.
that. I was accepted into a PhD program.
Yeah.
for cultural studies.
Incredible.
Yes,
So good.
I'm very people don't know this. I'm a little smart. I'm a little too smart for the coach industry sometimes. No, I'm kidding.
I love it. But
Yeah.
if you all can't tell, we have a lot of conversations, especially as friends, around mental health because this is such a huge passion of mine in my own company. And, you know, being best friends with a social worker, of course, we have a lot of conversations. And so we really wanted to have an entire episode dedicated to what I'm calling the entrepreneur mental health crisis. And just like addressing it, because I feel like nobody really is at the level that they need to be. I think we've started to, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I think we've started to with nervous system work and soft life and peaceful business. Even I talk about having a peaceful business and building a burnout proof business and things like that. But I still think that's pretty surface level and that we have like a deeper place to go.
Yeah. Why are you naming it a crisis?
Ooh, I am so glad you asked that.
Yeah.
I'm naming it a crisis, number one, because I think it's subtle and I think many people don't know that it's happening, which creates crisis situations for entrepreneurs, whether that is mental breakdowns, actual full-on mental breakdowns, or it's financial crises. What ends up happening is because they don't realize that their mental health is declining, they end up making different decisions that aren't necessarily for the best of their business, which then results in a financial crisis as well. I just think that so many people also don't even realize they're in a crisis as well. They also don't even know that they're in a crisis. So I want more people to realize how important it is.
Yeah. We have a very extensive list here that I want us to go through, and I'm super excited. I first want to ground this, and I think people who are listening to this for the first time, you know, when the episode drops, are going to be like our closest clients and colleagues, and they may not know some things about us and the things that we've been through. So I just wanted to ground this, and I'm going to talk about it from a subject matter perspective and an expert perspective, but I also want us to weave in our stories. And so very briefly, because we're going to do it throughout the episode, I'm sure, I just wanted to name that, like, we both have gone through, I want to say, and I'm just going to just say, like, extensive mental health issues before our businesses and during our businesses. I don't think I've shared this publicly, but I was actually diagnosed with mental health issues when I was 7 years old, and I was medicated as a kid throughout my entire childhood. And I've been in therapy since I was a child. And so I actually give a lot of credit to my mom, who was a single mom at the time. And in the late 1990s, early 2000s, that was completely unheard of to medicate your child. But she saw that I was struggling and I was going through things. And so I want to name that piece, and we're going to talk about lots of different stories on like how mental health has impacted both of us. What about you?
Yeah, for myself, I've been through 3 clinical mental breakdowns. When I say clinical, I mean that I was hospitalized in some shape or form or sent to some kind of treatment. And I am someone that was actually diagnosed late in life. I was misdiagnosed late in life, and I didn't really find out my true diagnoses until recently, which impacted my treatment of my mental health significantly. And so I definitely have a lot of experience with having mental health issues for sure. And absolutely, even though I was diagnosed late in life, I definitely identify as someone that struggled my entire life with mental health issues in various forms.
And we both have 7-figure businesses.
Truly.
How on earth?
Yeah.
Not to get dicey already, because we're supposed to get dicey at the end. Because again, we have a long list
Here we
here.
go. Yep.
One of my pet peeves is people think we're perfect.
It is very challenging for me, I will admit, when I have someone that will tell me like, well, I have these issues and I actually have either the same ones or, you know, or just issues in general.
Yeah.
And they're like, and you don't. And I have had people tell me, you know, you talk about being depressed. You don't look depressed. You don't seem that depressed, whatever it is. I mean, I've had that, you know, so many times just in my life, but especially in my business because of the level of success I have. You say you have depression, but not like me, or you say you have this, but not like me, or whatever it is. And it's definitely challenging because nobody has any idea what I go through, what you go through, etc.
And I would say we've been pretty public And I'm just
Very,
like,
actually more public than I'm comfortable with.
exactly. So I'm just
Yeah.
like, what more do people want? Do they want every time we have an episode that we do a social media post, do an Instagram post on it? So it's just the classic. And like several of my mentors have said this too. Once you get to a certain level of visibility, like you genuinely don't know what people are going through, even if we say it over and over again. Like one of my mentors, she struggled with postpartum anxiety, and she would say it over and over and over again, and yet people still put her on a pedestal. People still said, oh, you just have everything together. And she was like, I have 2-hour-long podcasts on my anxiety, and like that's still not enough for people. So,
and I think, and you and I have talked about this extensively, we're just very intentional about how we sell in our businesses as well. And it's very important that we don't necessarily commodify mental health and mental illness either, especially if that's not something that we're like there are people that specialize specifically in helping, for example, ADHD entrepreneurs, and they specialize in that, right? Versus I will usually say, like, I have experience as a neurodivergent person, but that's not, I'm not selling like
that's
ADHD.
not your offer.
That's not my offer, right? Yeah. And I think that we've talked a lot about how we're just really intentional about speaking from personal experience and things like that, and showcasing possibility more than we are commercializing necessarily, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's been an intentional decision we've both made.
Can I say something?
Go ahead.
My mental illness is a part of me. I talk about it, but it also doesn't define me.
Yes.
Which I would want someone to gather away from this episode, which I think is like the line where we talk about it, but we have whole other specializations outside of that. And so we have to balance that, but that also shouldn't mean that those things aren't minimized as well.
I'm so glad you said that, because my favorite thing is when someone comes to me and they say, oh my goodness, you're such an expert in team and systems and leadership and email and all these things, and it's so inspiring that you like also struggle with depression, but like they're leading with my skill set.
Sure, yeah.
Right? And it's inspiring that, you know, you've built a business with depression. I don't want people only coming to me because I'm depressed, and honestly they wouldn't.
Sure.
They wouldn't.
And they shouldn't.
And they shouldn't.
Yeah.
And they shouldn't. And also, I just don't know if you can build a seven-figure business that way, just on that.
Yeah.
You know, you need to have more than that. And so for me, my favorite thing is that, and I want to keep it that way.
Sure.
I want to keep it that way.
Yeah. Let's dive in. Again, we have an extensive list. If I were y'all, I would listen to this a few times. So let's first talk about like what is mental health. I first want to just name it's a chemical imbalance. It's not something that's your fault. It's not because you didn't, I'm a Black woman. It's not because you didn't pray enough or you didn't ask God to heal you. Like, it's a chemical imbalance. I would hope nowadays that we compare it to, your foot being broken or you having a chronic illness. Like I have a chronic autoimmune disease that I also deal with. And I would never shame myself for that. And I'm not going to shame myself for the mental health diagnoses that I have as well.
Yeah. And coming from my own experience, it's not because you're dramatic either. It's not because you're overly sensitive. It's a medical need.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. The 3 ways that it presents is anxiety, depression, 4. Okay. Anxiety, depression. I'm going to put like neurodivergence here. And then I would say like more severe diagnoses like borderline disorder, bipolar 1 or bipolar 2. So many other PTSD, complex PTSD, so many other things. If you're struggling with trauma, that's kind of the spectrum. I think the ones that impact entrepreneurship the most are anxiety and depression, of course, neurodivergence. And there's been a lot of talk within the mental health community, the psychology, social work, clinical psychology community on, do we want to include neurodivergence into mental health conversations? And what I've gathered, like after like talking with my husband who's been more on the ground, like he has his own private practice and everything, is that's actually more like ableism and like disabilities, because you would treat them differently. There's more therapeutic resources. You would kind of put it in like the category of like physical therapy, like autism, you would go see a physical therapist to help with your speech or to help you with your socialization skills. Not necessarily you would talk to a trauma therapist about your anxiety. So I did just want to delineate those two.
I am curious your thoughts, because also in my experience, what I found is that at least with working with clients and even with myself, neurodivergence is also, it's often its own thing, yes, but it can create anxiety and depression.
100%.
It can lead to mental health symptoms. Also, other OCD can lead to anxiety and depression, right? And
100%.
so I think that it still classifies as mental health from the standpoint of like it can lead to mental health symptoms, if you will.
100%.
It can create mental health symptoms.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good connection. Yeah. To that point, for today's conversation, I think we should, like, for lack of a better word, dwindle it down or simplify it to anxiety and depression. Yes. And I think Kirsten is a really good example of this, and something you said in a marketing clinic. But I've latched on to this is like a way you can communicate something in messaging is just by simplifying it. Like that's like mind blowing where you simplify it. I use the example when I'm teaching, I use this example from you. I say, Kirsten always uses the example of a funnel is just an automation. Like, I just love how you simplified that definition. So to simplify, I don't want to oversimplify, but to simplify for the sake of this conversation, anxiety and depression. Anxiety is worry, worry that is intense and you can't control. And then depression is a form of hopelessness. Something is not going to get better and you're always going to experience XYZ thing that you don't want happening. When was the time in your business where you felt either of these?
Oh, what was a time? I would say where it was the highest in my business, starting with anxiety. It was, I had just started my business, meaning I was in the first year. I had really started growing, getting a lot of clients, and it felt like I couldn't open my inbox. I was so debilitated by the idea of opening my email inbox, my Slack inbox, because all I thought about was how I was going to get annihilated by clients and just how overwhelming the idea of it was, just the severe anxiety of just opening my inbox. It just was so much. And then it also ended up becoming opening my bank account. Like just, it was opening anything just became debilitating.
The surprise of it all.
And then also not the surprise of it all. It was like, okay, let's get into it, right? Like, let's take the meeting today. That was a huge time in my business. Depression and like a form of hopelessness came shortly after that, when it felt like no matter what I did to try to fix it, it wasn't changing. Literally exactly like what you said. I mean, I did systems work, I did teamwork, I hired people. This is like a huge part of my burnout story, that turning point, because like I had hired the team people, I had hired employees, I had done all this stuff. Like I did the organizational chart, and like clients were still mad. Clients were still asking for refunds. It just was so painful. And it got to the point where I just was like, this is just not going to get better. And that's where depression would hit big time.
I feel like you can go into a depression easily, especially like as a coach or a consultant, after a launch that doesn't go well and you threw the kitchen sink at it, where you're like, I changed my messaging, I updated my webinar, I hired the coach for $20 million and my launch didn't get better. Yeah, I think that's a way.
Something, if I can add to the definition of depression, actually, because as someone that, what you just said, where you said you can have circumstantial depression, right? Like right after something. And I think also if you have ongoing depression, I would add to the definition that it's an exaggeration of any emotion.
So good.
It's really just an exaggeration of any emotion.
So good.
So for me, as someone that lives with like chronic ongoing depression, I find that whatever the emotion is, failure, sadness, fear, whatever, it's an exaggeration of that emotion that then depresses me down from there. And so I think that, that's why instantly I was like, whoa, okay, well, I've been depressed a lot in business actually, but it's more so because of the exaggeration of emotion.
So good. So good. I think for me, and I've talked about this all the time, like I have a ton of financial anxiety, always worrying, like, am I going to be okay? Am I going to be okay? Am I safe? Am I safe? And no amount of money, and I've made millions of dollars, no amount of money, that's just my brain. That's just like my chemical imbalance. It's how it presents. I had a bout of depression. Mine, again, is it's tied to financial. And I've talked about this, like I have a lot of wealth building goals. And I remember I had a very high cash month, but it was also a high expense month. And I was like, no matter how much money I make, I'm never going to be able to hit my wealth goals. It's never going to happen. I'll always have these expenses. I'll always have this level of responsibility. It's never going to get better. And they're often tied. So we have the definition of mental health. And then I think, which is what people are mainly talking about, like, how does it present? And for me, it presents as ruminating thoughts.
Yeah.
Where my brain will just yell terrible things at me all day long. All day, and it's never ending till the moment I wake up, to the moment I go to bed. I have to, and we'll talk about like managing our mind, but like my brain constantly is just like throwing things. I think when you see someone successful, you think, oh, they must feel so confident, or they must like themselves, or like they must have such high self-esteem. And I'm like, oh, you don't know the half of it. Like, my brain will just yell terrible things about me. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm a fraud. I'm so irresponsible. I mess up. I make mistakes. How could I do that? You're embarrassing. Just ruthless all day. And I think like the way my depression presents is I'll scroll more on social media. I'll disengage. I'll lay in the bed all day. I would say like classic depression symptoms.
Yeah. My personal signs are a few things. So I have different diagnoses. I won't name them today. However, the way they show up for anxiety is I bite my hair. People around me always know that, like, okay, Kirsten is really, really on edge if I am biting my hair. So that will happen. I also have tics like snapping, where I snap my fingers. People around me, most people don't know until they're in front of me, and then they're like, are you snapping at me? I'm like, no, it's my anxiety, right? It takes me everything not to snap when I'm in the middle of a podcast. And so I snap my fingers. Those are usually my anxiety symptoms. I also shake my leg a lot. And rumination for sure. For me, the way rumination looks is actually hyperfixating on one thought. And I mean, all day, it'll just be, there's a difference between overthinking and rumination. And rumination is, you know, really, I mean, this isn't the official definition, but the way it shows up for me is it's like this endless, repetitive pattern of the same thought that I cannot get off of. And it just keeps getting worse. You know, like whatever the thought is, it just expands into new thoughts that keep getting worse and worse. So rumination is big on anxiety. So those are my anxiety symptoms. They're actually much more physical, and they kind of manifest in tics and things like that. And then I also bite my lip pretty good too. And then for depression symptoms, for me, sleep is a big one. I actually stay up very late. I will stay up very late and then wake up very early. That's how I know that
you'll avoid
coming.
sleep.
I'll avoid sleep.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually avoid sleep. Many people will oftentimes oversleep.
Too much, right.
I actually avoid sleep, but then I will eventually oversleep because I'm so tired. So I avoid sleep. I also will scroll. I know that when I am like, I've been on TikTok literally all day, I know something's coming. I also will get really bad body dysmorphia as well. And I know that something's coming when I'm looking in the mirror and things are not, you know, it's a very exaggerated emotion around the way I look and things like that. And so those are just a few of my warning signs where I'm like, usually I'm like, something's coming if those things are happening. And then if I don't course correct, it will lead into more classic depression symptoms of oversleeping, laying in bed all day, not wanting to move, crying constantly, etc. We know ourselves very well. We know ourselves very well. And I mean, I've even said to you as a friend, I'm like, I'm avoiding sleep again. Like, I need to get back on my routine because the moment, that's actually my first one. When I start avoiding sleep, that's how I know. I have to like really quickly get myself back into a routine, into my mental health regulation routines to avoid something.
What is the cause of this? Something that you shared was you have and we kind of already touched on it, but like there's a circumstance plus a chemical imbalance that you naturally already have, and then it will impact resilience. And I like that like language. And how I define resilience, I'm curious what your thoughts is like your ability to bounce back. It's not that things are perfect, but when you do have something happen, what is your bounce back rate or your bounce back time? Is that how you would define it?
Absolutely. Yep, that's exactly how I would define it. It's, yeah, you have something happen in your life, you already have an existing chemical imbalance, and then from there, you just have low resilience. And
Yeah.
so, of course, it's going to lead into a mental health response.
Yeah. I was really thinking about also too, something you said was the lack of emotional regulation tools. And I think someone could be listening to this and be like, okay, like where does this lead me? I think it's all about tools. And if you don't know, just like how clearly we were able to like see here are our warning signs, if you don't know what your warning signs are, if you don't know what tools work for you, not just tools fundamentally, but tools that work for you, I think that also could like spew a mental health issue.
Yeah, and I added that in because I do think it's important to know if you don't identify as someone that has a chemical imbalance, you can still have mental health symptoms, even if it's circumstantial, right? And that just happens when you have a circumstance happen plus lack of some lack of emotional regulation, nervous system regulation to actually handle that circumstance mentally, and that can lead to mental health symptoms.
I was also thinking from the context of an entrepreneur and triggers. And this is where we get into a lot of sometimes the rhetoric or the language in entrepreneurship is my business caused my mental health to go down. And that's not a bad statement or a wrong statement. It may just not be 100% accurate. That doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just missing some context. I think there's some contextual nuance there. And I was thinking like, okay, what aspects of business does impact mental health? And I kind of broke it down into like 5 triggers. The first one, I think, especially for women of color, especially for first generation entrepreneurs, is financial triggers. Business and money go hand in hand. And if we've said a lot, like when our business was like at its peak, we were euphoric, right? Like we were so happy, right? And often it's not because we had like perfect lives, but we were able just to pay a lot of our problems away, right? And so financial triggers is one. Self-worth triggers. How I thought about this one is my content isn't performing well. I don't have a lot of leads coming. I try to pitch myself on podcasts and no one accepted my pitch. I'm bad. I'm not good enough. Something's wrong with me. I'm not a good coach. Anything where you're kind of like self-deprecating a little bit. Workload. And so, oh my gosh, I have this big launch to do. I have to do all my emails. I have to do a webinar. I have to post on social media. I also have to coach my clients. It's all too much. It's all too overwhelming. Expectations. My clients need me to show up on these calls and I don't have the energy to show up on them. My team needs things from me. The industry now is requiring me to show up more ethically. What does that mean? I can't say certain things or I might be called out. I might get haters, just a lot of expectations. And then outside expectations. So those 4 were all just business ones. And then outside we have whole lives, right? Something going on with your kids, something going on with your physical health, something going on within your faith, something going on within your family, your romantic relationship, or friendship. So those are kind of like the 5 triggers. So financial, self-worth, workload, expectations, and then outside triggers.